Hi, guys. Welcome again to another episode of When the Scriptures Become Real. It's again a podcast where we learn, where we study, where we grow, and we try to become the best versions of ourselves as we can as we continue to serve our Lord. Again, we're thankful that you guys are here. You can find the podcast on YouTube, subscribe there, and then you can also find it anywhere that you can get your podcasts. And we're so thankful for all the support that you guys have given us, and we've grown tremendously, and we're so thankful that you guys have found the podcast today. All right, so this is one that I've been looking forward to since probably 2 weeks ago. We've been talking about this for a while. So we've got a special guest on the podcast this morning. So it's not going to be just me. We've got a guest. His name is Sam Lawrence. Thankful that he's here with us. So I'm going to let Sam kind of introduce himself a little bit, and then we'll kind of go into our podcast for this morning. So, hey, Sam, how's it going, man?
Hey man, it's going good. How are you?
I'm good, man. Excited, dude.
Yeah, dude, I'm pumped. So my name is Sam Lawrence. I'm a member of the South Huntington Street Congregation in Kosciuszko, Mississippi. And hopefully, Lord willing, beginning of January, we'll be able to attend the Southeast Institute of Biblical Studies. It is a biblical college run by the Carnes Church of Christ in Carnes, Tennessee, right outside of Knoxville. And so yeah, met Jordan. Me and him got to talking, and like he said a little while ago, he was like, man, we got to talk about this. And so here we are, And so it's yeah, very excited, very thankful to be here.
Yeah, and the thing about Sam that's important is, so sometimes you'll meet people in life that were where you were a couple years ago. And so it was literally as we're talking on the phone, I'm getting to know him. I'm talking, I'm just laughing as he's talking. He's like, dude, what are you laughing at? I was like, dude, it literally sounds like I'm talking to myself 4 years ago. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity that our paths cross, and I'm able to help him, and he's able to help me as well. And I'm extremely thankful, for him to do that. And so obviously this is the first time that me and him actually seeing each other, face to face. It's only been phone call or kind of through
Yep,
Facebook Messenger. And
yep.
so he doesn't know I'm doing this, but I always have to give a good bro a plug. Good looking guy, preaching school. Come on, man. I mean, looks like Captain America. Come on, man. Like,
No,
you always
no,
gotta
Steve Rogers. I'll take that. I'll
you
take
always
that.
you always gotta be willing to help a bro out. So if
If I
nothing's
had, if
happening for
I,
you,
if
it's a good
if I had a
guy.
Twitter, if I had a Twitter, I would tweet that. I'd say someone just told me I look like Captain America. Great day, great day. I mean, it's 10:46, and
Hey
what a
man,
day it is already.
you
Thank
gotta
you.
start the day off right, man.
Yeah.
All right. So what we're gonna talk about today, we're gonna talk about Job chapter 38. So again, if you guys are listening to the podcast, let's open up our Bibles there to Job chapter 38. And we're going to look at verse number 2. And our topic today is, who is this that darkens counsel without knowledge? And so that's literally what the verse says in Job chapter 38, verse 2. But in order to understand that, we need to understand a little bit of the background. So obviously, throughout the book of Job, Job had lost everything, right? Simultaneously. And so Job doesn't know that this is a battle between God and Satan, but Job is still afflicted by Satan as things are going on. So obviously Job's three friends are explaining in different ways and in different viewpoints of why Job is suffering. But then there's a fourth friend that doesn't say anything throughout this whole time, but he begins speaking, and his name is Elihu. And so Elihu kind of almost has uh, a deism view about God. And so he almost thinks that he's also God's messenger as you read the book of Job. But then God speaks out of the whirlwind in Job chapter 38, and he talks to Job, verse 1. And then in verse 2, he says, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? So, what this podcast is for, as we introduce this podcast, I would think, and Sam, you can kind of attest this too, and kind of talk about this as we introduce this. This is almost for the person who needs some direction, who maybe needs some hope, because maybe the decisions that they've been making haven't been the right ones, or maybe they've been trying to do things the right way and what they feel is right, but they find out, man, this is just not it's not working in the way that I thought it would work. And so we could be doing the same thing that Job and everyone else was doing in verse 2. We can literally be darkening counsel by words without knowledge. So the question becomes, how can we as Christians today, how do we darken counsel? And so we're going to look at a few points today, and Sam and I are going to study this together. So the first thing, as we kind of introduce this topic, how can we darken counsel as Christians today? Number one, we can darken counsel by not knowing our worth. Sam, as you think about this a little bit, what kind of comes to your mind as we talk about not knowing your worth in terms of darkening our own counsel?
Well, and it's like you had mentioned before we started. Romans 5 was a really good place to turn, and just allowing our worth to be determined. Sometimes we can allow our worth to be determined by how others treat us or how others have treated us in the past, or things like that. And it's like, you were talking about earlier. If we put our worth in people, it's always going to be kind of up and down, up and down, up and down, because we're all human. Every one of us, are imperfect. We're going to let one another down. But if we determine our worth by the Bible and what the Bible says about us, and by Christ and what He did for us and His great love for us, then we're setting our feet on the solid ground. Like Genesis 1:27, it talks about we're made in God's image,
Mm.
and that's a great way to determine our worth, by how God kind of sees us, and kind of how we should see ourselves defined by the Bible.
And I think
And
about
so,
that too, man. You think about not knowing our worth, and you mentioned this a little bit too from Romans chapter 5. Sometimes other people see us in a better light than we see ourselves. And so, just think about this for a second. Think about how many people, and if we want to make it personal, think about how many Christians there are walking around, and there's other Christians that believe in them more than they believe in themselves. So if you're a Christian like that listening today, this automatically almost puts you in a box where you're at the mercy of what other people think about me. So if you're walking around and you always have kind of this low self-esteem and you don't feel worthy, or you don't feel good enough, well, you kind of walk around, and by the people that you're constantly waiting on them to say, well, you're awesome, you're great, you're good. Well, what happens when those people aren't near you? What happens then? And so this is kind of a destroying mindset. And if we stay here in Romans 5, when you look up the word worthy in the dictionary, the word literally means to be good, deserving respect, praise, or attention, having enough good qualities to be considered important or useful. So think about this for a second. We just talked about Lord of the Rings, right? Kind of one of those medieval movies, right? That's one of Sam's movies
well,
there.
yeah, I love those movies. Yeah,
Classics, right? They're good
yeah,
movies.
they are.
So you think about it, and there's always kind of in those movies, there's always a peasant, right? There's always somebody, sir, I just need a dime, need something, right? So they're always looking for something. But in some of those movies, they have access to the king. And so when you think about Romans 5, look at these words here in verses 1, 2, and 3. Therefore, verse 1, being justified by faith. That sounds like the person that gave us justification, a la Jesus Christ. Obviously, he thinks you're worthy because he justified you. But notice the avenue. It's not by how you feel. He says, therefore, being justified by what others think about you or by what you think about yourself. He says, no, we're not justified by feelings. We're justified by faith. And as you know, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, right, talking about what faith is, and even Romans 10:17. So then faith, knowing that we're justified, that doesn't come by feelings. Faith comes by hearing, right? And hearing by the word of God. Then verse 2, not only are we justified by faith, verse 2, we also have access by faith. Then verse 3, right, we can glory in tribulation. And then verse 5, we have hope that maketh us not ashamed. So think about all these things, Sam, that gives us access to Christ. So why do you think so many of us sometimes walk around knowing this, but still feeling unworthy to be a part of this?
That's a really good question. It could be, um, Are we allowing our views of ourselves? Um, are we allowing our counsel to be darkened by others,
Mm,
by people, or are we letting who we are be determined by the Bible? Who are we going to for counsel? Because it's easy when times are hard, or when you're looking for something, when you're looking for that affirmation or just an answer to a question, it's so easy to go to someone else because you get that immediate answer.
yep.
But the first place, like you said, I think in one of your podcasts, needs to be we go to God in prayer. We may not get that immediate answer, but what we do have is we give that up to someone who's all knowing, all powerful, who's not going to give us necessarily what we want, but he's going to give us something better. He's going to give us what we need rather than what we want. But that can
Mm,
be a hard thing, man.
yeah.
Imagine if we got what we wanted all the time. That'd be bad. That would be bad. That would be bad. But so you said a minute ago talking about how let me get there, how the peasant which was great, by the way. Your peasant voice was
I
wonderful.
appreciate it. I work on it. I work on it.
But you were talking about how he was wanting to get something from the king, or was trying to get something from the king. And that made me think of something I was talking about yesterday in Bible class. And this isn't original with me. This is I don't know who it's original with, but imagine trying to get in touch with the president of the United States. This is probably something you've heard before. I don't know about you, but I can't do it. If I was to try and call the president right now, I wouldn't get through to him. Or even the mayor of Kosciuszko, I don't know if I could get in touch with him. But as a Christian, 1 Peter 3:12, for the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous and his ears are open to their prayer. Think about that. We can
Mm.
go before the God of heaven in prayer and he hears us. He hears us. The God of heaven hears us. The God that spoke the universe into existence hears us. And I know personally that's something I can take for granted at times, but that's a privilege. That's a blessing.
And you think about it, now this makes me think about this. So if we kind of walk around feeling kind of, and we've all been here, and we never want to feel like we're, singling people out. We've all been here. But the question becomes, if that's the constant mindset that we find ourselves in, always kind of, it's almost like the social media effect, right? So you think about a person that has this insecure mindset, right? Or they always feel like I need something from someone in order to feel a certain type of way. So that's why, things like Facebook, Instagram, now those things have their necessary uses for the gospel and other things for sure. But that's why those things are so popular. Because if I'm not getting that, then I need to put something out there so I can get some likes. So I can get some approval from people. So it makes me feel better in turn. Well, if we spend so much time looking for the approval of others, then that automatically, like you mentioned, that pulls us away from the creator, right? I think about even what David mentions, right? In even in Psalm chapter 12, right? He goes to the Lord, right? Verse number 1, Lord, help me. The godly man ceases, verse number 1. For the faithful man fall from among the children of men. So David felt like, look, there's not many godly men around here left. But notice he didn't look for approval in other places. He said, man, I need to go talk to God. We need to, I think, and like you said, and I fall into this as well, we kind of take that for granted. And going back to Romans chapter 5, verse 2, notice what God, if we take that, if we take that peasant mindset, God gave quote unquote peasants, right, the opportunity to speak with him without an appointment, one on one, 24/7. And how often, I mean, think about that, man. How
Hmm.
often do we just not take advantage of the opportunity to just, Lord, this is what's going on. I just want to talk to you, and that's the beautiful thing about God is we have that opportunity to talk to him. And the more that you talk to him and the more you build that relationship with him, the more you'll understand your worth. I think that's a point that a lot of us miss, man. Because if I just spend my time talking to people, well, so and so really doesn't like me that much. So and so, I mean, they think I'm nice, but they don't think I'm great.
Hmm.
So then you kind of try to spend your life proving to people that you're this person. One
Well,
lesson, one lesson to learn. Don't spend time
and,
trying to prove yourself, man.
and one thing you can fall into this, go to people for that self-worth or that, that kind of advice and things like that. And you can get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm burdening this person, I'm burdening this
Yeah.
person. And, sometimes even praying to God, you can be like, oh man, I don't, but he says, keep seeking, seek and you shall find, ask and it will be given, knock and the door shall be open. And also 1 Peter 5:7, this is a key one. Casting all your cares on him. Why? Because
For he
he
cares.
cares for you. So we go to the God of heaven who knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows me better than I know myself. Our very hairs are numbered on our head. And also thinking about Jesus in Hebrews, how we don't have a high priest who's not able to sympathize with us, but one who in all ways was tempted as we were, yet without sin. And so it can be really easy sometimes, just to forget that.
And that makes me think of even Matthew chapter 11, right? When Jesus talks about, look, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. But here's the great thing about that, though. He says, I don't want you just to come to me just expecting everything's going to be easy. You have a responsibility in order to get this rest. Well, what's my responsibility? Just sit here and just have this type of woe is me attitude? Verse 29, he says, first of all, the first thing you got to do in order to get some rest, it's kind of an oxymoron. The first thing you have to do to get rest is you need to take my yoke. So in order to get rest, just like we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, we just need to start focusing on the kingdom. So we feel like in order to get rest, we just have to rest more. No, he said, if you want to get some rest, you need to start doing my work. Take my yoke upon you. And he said, take some time and learn of me. So in order for me and you to get rest, we need to learn more about him and do his work. But how can we darken counsel like everyone else was in Job chapter 38, verse 2? We feel like, well, God just has to give it to me, or everybody else has to cater to me, or everybody else has to do all this stuff for me. Whoa, 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 whoa. Christ says, look, there's some work you got to do. And he said, just in case you think this is too hard, just in case you think taking my yoke is too above you, or you think you don't know enough, or you think you can't learn of me, here's something I'll let you know. Verse 30, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So now what excuse do we have, bro? He literally eliminated all excuses there. We got to start working.
And that made me think of 1 John 5:3. It says, for this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not
grievous. Yeah.
I mean, and that's,
it's simple. And the way, as we look at this, the first way that we can darken counsel, and I think it's important for you to understand too, that phrase in Job 38, darkening counsel, it literally means to be clouded. So how do we cloud what the Lord has for us? By number one, our thinking becomes clouded when we don't even know our own worth. So if we're walking around not knowing who we are, not knowing that we are good, we're clouding our own judgment. So therefore, again, according to the text in Job 38:2, God said, who is this that darkens or clouds, right? Who clouds counsel without word, or with words without knowledge. So now let's make this implication here. So if we're doing all this, Sam, and we don't think we're worthy, we're darkening counsel, and guess what we don't have? Still, knowledge. We could be Christians for 20, 30, 40. I've been a member of the church for all my life. But if you're walking around still feeling unworthy, you're walking around with clouded thinking, number one. And then number two, you're walking around with no knowledge. It's a scary thought, man. And we talked about this even in Hosea. Why are my people destroyed? For a lack of knowledge. So, I mean, it's very important that as we study this together, and understand this is a process that we work on together. So we understand, even with Paul, he mentioned, look, some of you were fornicators. Some of you were adulterers. Some of you had this. So it's not something that you're just going to forget overnight. And we're not saying that this is a quick fix process that everything is just going to just go away, when you read Romans chapter 5. It is a process. But as this is a process, I'm reminded of what Paul said. right? In Philippians, I believe it's Philippians chapter 3. Paul, knowing who he was, he said, you know what? This is what I'm going to do. Verse number 13 of chapter 3. Brethren, I count myself not to have apprehended. So yes, I'm preaching the gospel, but I don't think I have everything figured out. Then he said, but this one thing that I do, forgetting those things which are behind, and I continue to reach forth. So understanding there are Christians with past, there are Christians with difficult backgrounds, there are Christians that have gone through terrible things. And so when you hear things like you're worthy, when you hear things like you're good enough, when you hear things like, you are precious in God's people's eyes and you're precious in God's eyes, I understand it's hard to believe that. But notice, if anybody could say that, it's Paul. And Paul said, you know what? I don't forget the things that I understand they're there, but I'm not going to let that run my life. I'm going to keep reaching forth. So Paul didn't let his past darken his counsel. Ooh, that could have been another point, man. Letting your past darkening your
That's talking
counsel.
your counsel.
Ooh, man.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's good. We could have went there. But that's another study for another day. So, you have anything else as we kind of talk about this, bro?
Well, no, I mean, I just you pretty much nailed it. I mean, I had just a few thoughts of, you were talking about knowledge, and we can have our counsel darkened, and not have a right view of ourselves, and not have knowledge, and be a Christian our whole life. And I just kind of thought of, well, what happens if we have faulty knowledge? And so it made me think of, 2 Kings 5 with Naaman, behold, I thought.
Yeah.
And so, and it also made me think of Paul. Paul said, I've lived my life with all clear conscience. Well, he had a clear conscience. He had a good conscience, but how had he lived his life previously? And so with a lack of knowledge, Hosea, like you said, 4:6, my people are destroyed because of a lack of knowledge. And then I was thinking, well, where do we get the knowledge from? And what happens when we get that knowledge? And it made me think of Colossians, I'll start in verse 9, and it says, and so we heard from the day, and so from the day we heard, we have not ceased to pray for you, asking that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will and all spiritual wisdom and understanding, so as to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord. So in order to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, we have to have knowledge.
You gotta have knowledge. You
Fully
gotta have
pleasing to him,
knowledge.
bearing fruit in every good work. And what happens when we increase in the knowledge of God? Being fruitful in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God. And what happens? Being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might for all endurance and patience with joy.
Yes.
So,
And that's Colossians chapter 1, what he just read. But as we close this point, when you think about this is why as preachers of the gospel, that you always, no matter the pushback, no matter the consequence, quote unquote, always preach, study, 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 study. Because it's not just for, well, let me just show you how much I know, or let me show you how smart I am. We're saying this because of verse number 8 and 9 in Colossians chapter 1. Study this so you, not for me, so that you can be full of knowledge and wisdom and spiritual understanding, so that you can learn to walk worthy. So, like you said, so in order to do that, look, you got to know something, and you got to know the scripture, and we have to spend some time building that relationship with God. So, yes.
Oh no, and one more
keep
thought.
going, man.
Talking about the importance of studying scripture just triggered a thought. It made me think of Paul talking to Timothy in 1 Timothy 4, verse 15. Paul had just told Timothy kind of what to do. He said, practice these things, immerse yourself in them, so that all may see your progress. And he said, keep a close watch on yourself and on the teaching. Persist in these, for by so doing, you will save both yourself and your hearers. And so, I mean, it's important, it's important, and sometimes I remember on one of your podcasts, I think you talked about how, it was boring work, and sometimes it is hard. Sometimes it is hard, man. And sometimes it is, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's not always jump out of bed, I'm ready to go, but it's so important.
Yeah.
It's so important. There's walk in a worthy manner. In order to walk in a worthy manner, we have to know this. And one more thing, I'm sorry, I know.
No, dude, keep going.
We need to move on.
Man, we're good.
One more thing that made me think of was beginning in Romans 12, verse 1. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may understand what is the will of God, what is good, acceptable, and perfect. And so the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God. In order for us to understand the will of God, we have to have that renewal of the mind through the word of God.
You gotta have knowledge. And so and that's why God said, so think about how personal that question in Job 38:2 says now. Who is this who darkens counsel with words, but without knowledge? So, and we're using this study because Sam and I, we've had to self-examine ourselves too as we study this together. So if you've been walking in a way where you're constantly waiting for almost the approval of other people, well, all these people, they have to like me. They have to think I'm great. They have to. If you're walking for the approval of others rather than the approval of God, you are walking and you're clouding your own judgment without knowledge. And so as we study this together, let's kind of flip the script here. So let's learn, again, like we said, this is a process. It's not going to happen overnight, but let's learn to understand our worth. And the only person that can help you understand your worth is Christ. And just before we move on quickly, just to give a tip as we talk about, spiritual dating in a sense, if you're always waiting on another person to give you that approval, you're looking for approval in the wrong place. What that person should be doing, whether you're a guy or a girl, whoever you're interested in, they should be trying to point you to Christ, not to them, because they're trying to live for Christ too. So it's very important, in order to know our worth is only found in Christ. It's not found in people. So that's important to understand. So then number 2, so who is this man that darkens counsel with words without knowledge? So not only can we darken counsel by not knowing our worth, but then number 2, we darken counsel by doing nothing and being afraid. So I heard someone once say that doing something is an action, but also doing nothing is just as loud as an action as doing something. So I'm reminded of Matthew chapter 25, right? And obviously we have the account of the talents there. And it's very important to understand that the one with the 2 and the one with the 5 talents, they doubled theirs. So keep that in mind. Understand that the 1, 2, and 5, all of them were on the same playing field. They all received talents, different measures, but they all received the same thing. They all were told to do the same work. So the 2 doubled, the 5 doubled. Then the 2 and the 5, they were said, well done, thou good and faithful servant. But then verse 24 is where it gets interesting. Then he which received the 1, he came, and notice what he said. So here's something that's very interesting. As you look at Matthew chapter 25, does it ever say that the 1 talent man, or that the 2 talent man and the 5 talent man, did they ever have dialogue? They never spoke. They just did the work. That's interesting, isn't it? But then notice the only one that talked was the one that wasn't working. So verse 24, then he which received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew that you were what type of man? Ooh, Lord, you're too hard. Let's stop right there, bro. So think about this. We can darken counsel when everything that the Lord tells us to do is we say it's too hard. It's interesting as you sit and you see certain things, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording. We will do what we want to do. And so there's other hard things that people do, right? Their jobs, not easy. It's hard, right? Sports, right? We both played sports. It's hard. But whatever you want to do, you will do it regardless of the difficulty level. So who is this that darkens counsel using words without knowledge? So when we think everything that the Lord has us do is too hard, then guess what we're doing, dude? We're darkening counsel, man, because it's too hard. You got something as we keep going through this, man?
Well, it made me think, literally just when you said that, we think it's too hard. God, when he was telling Moses what to do. What was Moses
Oh,
saying? He was like, oh, I'm not an eloquent speaker. He was
can't
like,
do
I
it.
can't do this.
Can't do it.
And what happened? God got mad.
Yep.
And then the children of Israel, they said, oh, if we only had stayed in Egypt, we had fish and the onions and the leeks and the garlic. God had blessed them with the manna. And it said that God was greatly angry with them. But one more thought, you were talking about here, how we can darken counsel by saying things are too hard. It made me think we can also darken counsel by having an incorrect knowledge of who God is, because he said, I knew you to be a hard master, reaping where you did not sow, gathering where you scattered no seed. I mean, that sounded like he had an incorrect view of who God was. And and
Oh man.
and also you're talking about the parable, I mean, the one talent man, who he did nothing. You go down a little bit farther, starting in verse 42, the ones who will tell, depart from me, for I was hungry and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, you gave me no drink. We say, well, I'm just not going to do anything.
Yeah.
That's I mean, that's a problem. We talked about earlier, Pilate.
Yeah.
He chose not to do anything, and that choice put Jesus on the cross.
Okay. So now it's the awesome thing about studying the scripture together. It's just you get so many thoughts on this as you study. But verse 24, okay, so the first excuse he gave was, okay, Lord, this is too hard. It's too hard. So just to make some quick application here, because something is hard, we give up so quick. Anything. I mean, it doesn't necessarily even have to be spiritual, but we can even talk physical. Oh, it's too hard. I can't. It's too hard. I just won't be able to. So the first thing is, look, you have to understand. So if we ask this question, so the one talent man said it was too hard. How come the other two didn't? You think about that first. So the Lord put the hard work on you, but the other ones, it was easier though, right? So people, and this is what happens sometimes, bro, is people will almost look at each other just like this. So man, look at Sam, man. I mean, he's going to preaching school, he's doing this. I mean, he's already quoting scripture like this before preaching school. There's no way I could I could be like that because I don't know anything. So that I'm a Christian, but there's no way I could be like Sam. So for Sam, he's the 2 talent and he's the 5. Yeah, he's double his. But for me, it's too hard for me. So we'll compare to one another, and then we'll blame God. Well, God, you've just made it harder on me. Sam has more opportunities than me. Sam has a better mind than me. Sam has this more than me. So Lord, you've made it hard. You see how easy this can snowball? So look, first of all, he said it's too hard. Then verse 25, here's the second excuse. And these two always go together. So he said, you were a hard man. And then verse 25, I was afraid. So then because I was afraid, instead of doing the work, I went and I hid your talent. So if we make some personal application here, Sam, this gets kind of crazy, man. Think about this. How many of us, again, what's our original question? Who is this who darkens counsel using words without knowledge? So is it possible that we have Christians today who blame God for things being too hard, 2, they're afraid, and maybe not physically, but spiritually they hide. Well, it's too hard, so I'm not going to do it. How many of us are kind of hiding from God because things are too hard? Right? It's a crazy mindset, man.
And like the sermon I preached on yesterday, it was a challenging one for me, because I know it's an area where I really have to, like, I try to do better. Like, I'm just constantly trying to do better at it, if I'm being honest. It's one where I can be afraid at times if I'm being honest, and it was on it was the mission of the church, and it was on evangelism. Luke 19:10, the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. And so how easy for us is it to, like I've heard you talk about one of your podcasts, you get a group of people together and say, let's go door knocking, and they say, well, we've tried that before and it doesn't work, or things like that, or to go up to someone and talk to them about the gospel. How easy for us is it to approach that situation, and we psych ourselves out. We're like, oh, they're gonna get mad at us, they're not gonna like us, we're gonna burn that bridge, that relationship's gonna be over, things like that. We
Yep.
talk ourselves out of it before we even get to it.
Yep.
But we become afraid, but it's such an easy thing to do. And this is me personally speaking. It's an easy thing
It's
to do.
easy.
It's so easy to do. You can come up with a million different reasons. It's not gonna work. This ain't gonna work. That ain't gonna work. This ain't gonna work. And with that mentality, it's never gonna work.
It's never going to work.
It's
And
never gonna work.
sometimes, and I think it's important for us to be honest and to be, kind of say, look, man, I've never, there were times where I was afraid too. I mean, obviously I've said that in a previous podcast before. There were times where I ran from preaching school. I'm not going. What are you talking about? I'm terrible at memory work. I'm terrible I'm not going to go. Right. Sometimes we run from the work, but the beautiful thing about that is sometimes the Lord will let us run like Jonah, but then sometimes he'll give us a second chance to go do it again. And so, I think about Numbers chapter 13, right? We mentioned this before with Caleb and Joshua, right? Look, we can go take this land. They're bread for us, right? Chapter 14. We can take it. The Lord is with us. But then you always got the other 10. Well, we're like grasshoppers in their sight. They're giants over there. There's no way we can overtake it, right? And the text says that the 10 men, they gave an evil report. So whenever it comes to spiritual things, and evangelism is not the only spiritual thing. Guess marriage is a spiritual thing. Evangelism is a spiritual thing. Family, right? The institution of the home, that's a spiritual thing. Well, this is just going to be too hard. So I just don't. You see the evil report that we can even bring in ourselves. We can psych ourselves out, like you said, and we can use up so many excuses of why. Well, it didn't work for that person that tried it, so why would it work for me? Well, it didn't work for that.
And it made me think of this. So a lot of times what can happen then, personally, is we see the person and the perceived problem we come up with.
Yeah.
You think of David in 1 Samuel 17. So David, comes to the battlefield, and he's immediately met with, like verse 25. They said, and the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel, and the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches, and will give him the daughter and make his father's house free in Israel. And so, and his brother even, it gets angry with him and discourages him. Everyone is discouraging David, but all David sees is Goliath. He says, who is this that defies the armies of the living God? So David, if you look, David only mentions Goliath twice.
Yeah.
But he mentions God 9 times. You see, his God thoughts outnumber his Goliath thoughts. And so we can take that mindset, take it over to evangelism.
Yeah.
I guess you could say, do our thoughts about what could go wrong outnumber our thoughts of who God is? And then one of the things David did was he drew on God's past faithfulness. When Saul kind of challenged him, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And so he drew on God's past faithfulness. So I'm sure we can see times in the past of we were in a situation that we said, I'm done.
Yeah.
How am I going to get out of this? It gets so dark. How am I going to get out of this? But God delivered us. He took us from it. And now we can see that, and we can apply it to the situation we're in now, which that's easier said than done.
Yeah, that's true. And I think about, as we kind of look at this in its totality, fearfulness and being afraid kind of go hand in hand. And, I think about Revelation chapter 21, right? Verse number 8, but the fearful and the unbelieving, right? And the abominable, murderers, whoremongers, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. And so can you imagine, man? And this is it was a sobering thought that I heard in a sermon before. Imagine being a Christian, being immersed for your sins, but throughout your entire Christian walk, I mean, I'm talking about, being a Christian for 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, And all this time, you've been afraid, right? And so notice verse number 8, it couples fearfulness and unbelieving together. So, like you mentioned, David looked at, okay, this is what God did in the past. This giant thing's in front of me now. Why can't he do this now too? So, when we're fearful as Christians, and myself included, I guess both of us can say the same thing at times. When we're fearful about something, for some reason, we don't believe in it. So God is saying here, so the fearful of my people are those that don't believe. How do we know that? Even in the book of Hebrews, the Bible describes there in Hebrews that the children of Israel didn't enter into Canaan because of unbelief. So the same thing with us. So what if, again, so let's put what we talked about up to this point. So what if I'm walking around feeling unworthy? Guess what? I don't believe. God, I don't believe that that sacrifice that Jesus did was enough for some reason. And I don't believe in myself. So I'm just not going to do what you want me to do and grow. So I can't walk worthy. Then on top of that, I'm going to do absolutely nothing and I'm afraid. So what makes us different than the children of Israel that walked in the wilderness? We won't be able to enter into heaven because we didn't even believe in the little things, right? So it's very important, and we can know this if we had some knowledge. And that's why it takes some time, right, to study and to understand and to learn more about yourself and to learn more about God as we study together.
Well, and two thoughts I had while you were going through that, talking about fear. First thing, 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7 says, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and of love and self-control."
Yeah.
And also another thing, it's 2 Peter chapter 1, starting about in verse 5, I think it is. But it goes to it talks about adding certain things to your faith. Let me get there real quick. It talks about adding certain things to your faith. And it says in verse 9, let me get there. Okay. It talks about adding certain things to your faith. And it says, verse 8, "For if these qualities are yours and are increasing, they keep you from being ineffective or unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ." And verse 9, what happens, or why is someone possibly not growing? Because whoever lacks these qualities is so nearsighted that he is blind, having forgotten he was cleansed from his former sins.
Having forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is right there. And how many of us, man, if we're making real application here, and ourselves included, we're never talking from a mode of perfection because we're still working too. But how many of us spend so much time looking inward? Man, I'm not good enough, or I'm not this. You've forgotten, right? We've literally forgotten the beauty of the sacrifice of Christ, right? Which is an amazing thing. And that's why I think it's important that every Sunday, um, that the Lord made it a point for us to remember, right? So if you remember what I did and you remember me and you remember why I did it and who I did it for, if you truly remember, then you'll start to understand, okay, I'm good for what the Lord wants me to do. But I've forgotten, right? We've forgotten it. And it's so easy to do that, man. And
Yes.
so we can darken counsel by absolutely doing nothing, right? And being afraid. And so then number 3, what's another way that we can darken or clouded the judgment, right? Clouding counsel without knowledge. This is a big one. And especially I think this is a big one for, obviously this is for everybody, but specifically, I believe kind of people in our age range and below, by listening to the wrong people. So many times, we find ourselves needing help, needing advice, needing counsel, needing direction from people. And we'll get it, but we'll get it from the wrong source. So I'm reminded of 1 Kings chapter 12. 1 Kings chapter 12 talking about Rehoboam. And Rehoboam had the opportunity to make a decision that was right for the kingdom as king. And so obviously beginning in verse number 4, it mentions here, "Thy father made our yoke grievous. Now therefore make thou the grievous service of thy father and his heavy yoke which he put on us lighter, and we will serve thee." So he said, look, if you're just a little just be gentle more than your father was, we will serve thee as subjects of your kingdom. We will serve thee. And then verse 5, he said, okay, depart, and yet depart from me for 3 days, then come again to me, And the people departed. And so the king consulted with the old man that stood before Solomon, his father, while he yet lived, and say, how do you advise that I handle these people? And they spake and said, if you will just be a servant and you will serve them and answer them and speak good words to them, they're going to be your servants forever. Think of the sound advice that is right there. And the more you'll get into preaching, Sam, just to give you some advice here, the more verse number 6 will just speak so loud to you. So how do I be a good minister? How do I be a good minister of the gospel? Verse number 6, right? All you do, be a servant to them, right? Serve them, answer them from the Bible, whether they like it, whether they don't like it, but also speak good words to them in meekness. And then you can be able to work together. They're not your servants, but we're working together. Then verse 8, but he forsook that counsel and he went to the of the old men, and then he went and consulted with the ones that grew up with him. And they said, what counsel do you give? And the young man said, verse 10, your father made our yoke heavy and made it lighter unto us. But this is what you're going to say. My little finger shall be thicker than my father's loins. Whereas my father laid you with a heavy yoke, I'm going to add to that yoke. And my father chastised you with whips, and I'm going to chastise you with scorpions. So now he had the opportunity to listen to good counsel, but he listened to people that were in his age range. So many times we can darken counsel by thinking that we know more than what we really know. Right. So what do you get kind of when you talk about this here?
Well, it makes me, you can kind of, sometimes you go to people for advice and you get the advice you need to hear, but it's not the advice you want to hear.
That's right.
So you go somewhere else and you have advice that sounds better, but it's not necessarily the best advice for you. And it's like me and you were talking about over the phone, where you talked about going to school and maybe like getting to know an older gentleman there, just to have that wise counsel.
Yeah.
That's like me. I study with a fellow named Ray here, great guy, lots of funny stories, but it would take up a lot of time. But that wise counsel, how nice is it to sit down, like for example, like probably with your dad or someone like that,
Yeah.
who can just pour out that wise counsel to you. Someone who's going to give biblical advice from the scriptures, someone who's lived longer, and someone who can say, all right, who can really just give you a better understanding of where you're at now, and who can just it's refreshing. I find it refreshing, to have that wise counsel from an older Christian, who's been in the faith a lot longer, who can say, who can just really tell you what you need to hear rather than what you want to hear.
And like you mentioned, I said this in an earlier podcast talking about, in order to be a master at something, you have to learn from a master. And so obviously when you get a lot of people in the same age range together, that's always great because they can encourage one another to keep going. But in terms of, okay, what should I do moving forward type questions, that should go to way older counsel. And so this is why sometimes, and I'm saying this because I fell into this, but this is why so many times we don't listen to that older counsel, because in our minds, well, they're not relatable, right? They don't really understand, what I'm going through. But in order to understand a master, it takes, like I said, it takes some boring time. And so sometimes you got to sit there, and you're not going to be at a fun event. You're not going to be at a ball game or something. You're going to be sitting across from the coffee table and talking and just listening. You might not say a word for 3 hours. All you got to do is just sit there and just listen, take notes. Not a lot of people our age want to do that, but I'm telling you, if you could find good women, Titus chapter 2, if you can find good men, Titus chapter 2, all of 1st and 2nd Timothy, and just, hey, can we just sit down and just talk and just sit and take notes and just listen? Just listen. There are so many times, especially as young guys, I got to do something, right? We just talked about this a couple days ago. I gotta fix it. I gotta fix the situation. I gotta say the right thing. I gotta text the right thing. I gotta go to the right person. I have to do this. I gotta fix this right now. All you gotta do, man, just sit back and just listen. And when you just kind of soak that information in, you'll find yourself just getting better and better and better, because you'll find yourself almost, and it's not to say that you're better, but you'll almost find yourself mentally ahead, even though you're the same age. So that's always the goal, just to be ahead, so that you can be a little bit ahead of the curve when it comes to certain things in life.
Well, and you mentioned in that same podcast, I think you said we can kind of demature ourselves,
Literally,
and we really kind of can,
literally.
if we, which there's nothing wrong with spending time with people our
Yeah,
own
there's nothing
age,
wrong with it. Yeah, for sure.
and the majority of my friends, they're all a little bit older than me, but there's nothing wrong with spending time with people our own age. Like it just because we can all relate with one another, we're
Right.
generally probably going through the same things. Like we're talking about me and you, how we met, and we're talking with one another.
Yeah.
But like you mentioned, that podcast, we can kind of demature ourselves. Like it, in order to, I find that personally, like you were talking about growing, finding that person who, whether a good Christian man or a good Christian woman who's older, who you can have that wise counsel from, helps a ton.
A ton.
I mean, really, it does a ton, because it's all about, like you said, it's not about, hey, I know more than this guy. Hey, I know more than that guy. I know more than this. It's about equipping yourself to be the best soldier, to be the best servant for Christ you can possibly be. What's going to help me to be the best possible servant of Christ I can be? What's going to help me to do the most in his kingdom? It's not about being better than this person or better than that person. Galatians 6:2, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. We're all one body helping one another. But what's going to help me to do the most for Christ I can do?
And here's some advice too, for those that are listening and for us. The advice that I would give that I've 100% failed at was, when we talk about wise counsel, don't wait for them to find you. So if I'm just sitting here as a young man, or I'm sitting here as a young woman, well, no older woman has come up to me, right? No older man has come up to me. Don't just sit and wait for someone to come to you. You go find them, right? So again, we talk about, and we're going to mention this in a second, right? Matthew chapter 6, right? Verse 33, seek ye first the kingdom, right? Then even chapter 7, right? Seek and ye shall find, right? Ask and the door shall be open unto you. So in order for me, you, and all these other listeners, in order for us to get knowledge, let's stop sitting and waiting for people to cater to us. Instead, go to them. And that was my mistake, is just sitting here kind of waiting for counsel. But if I see an older man, if I see an older lady, hey, can we sit and just talk just for a couple of minutes? I just want to learn from you for a second. Or, hey, can we have lunch? Or, what do you think about this from the scripture? Go out and seek it. And I heard the baseball coach from Freed, Jonathan Estes, right? He's one of the counselors at camp that we go to here, and he's the head baseball coach at Freed. And he would always talk about seeking first the kingdom. And we always seek for what we want. So whatever you want, you will find it. You will break down any barriers. You will break down any obstacle. You will fail multiple times in order to get that prize of whatever you want in life. And so for us, if we really want to be better Christians, I will go find them. They don't have to find me. Now, it might happen that way, that they find me like we did. We just happen to find each other.
Yeah.
Right? Just how random it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's great that happens that way, but most times you got to go find them. And so look around you, right? Open up your eyes, see who's there at your local congregation, and go find them and go talk to them. And so that's such a great, topic of talking about. Sometimes we'll just listen to the wrong counsel instead of listening to wise counsel. I'm even reminded of Proverbs chapter 10, Proverbs chapter 9, verse number 1, talking about what wisdom does, right? Wisdom builds her house, right? Wisdom does all of these great things. It talks about how wisdom always builds. And so if we're building something, you need help in building it. And so we need help from that older counsel. Wisdom, verse number 12 of chapter 8, wisdom dwells with prudence and knowledge, and the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. All these things older counsel can teach us. But there's some things that I can get from you, Sam, but there's some things I cannot get from you. There's things you can get from me, but there's some things you cannot get from me just because we're not there yet.
That's right.
And so we almost kind of have to humble ourselves and say, hey, look, man, I'm glad that you came to me for advice, but why don't you go talk to him? because I
Well,
just
and
don't have it.
it's like we were talking on the phone the other night, and I meant this, and I mean it again when I'm about to say it now. But there comes a point when you just have to admit. I mean, there comes a point when I have to admit this, and it's I really mean it. Like, I don't know Jack.
Yeah, don't know Jack.
Because I mean, Job, darkening counsel, God, he just starts rapid fire. Where were you when I did this? Where were you when I did this? Where were you when I did this? Think about it. Apart from the revealed knowledge of God's word, what do I know? Apart from this, I mean, 2 Peter 1 verse 3, he's given us all things that pertain to life and godliness. Apart from this book, how much do I really know, or how much would I really know? Jeremiah 10:23, I have seen that it's not in man to direct his way. And it sometimes it takes that humbling attitude, like you were talking about, to just admit that, not to have a low view of yourself. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying here
Right.
is just to understand that, okay, I need to, sometimes I need to seek out wise counsel, because I don't know everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes, it takes, I don't know, I guess sometimes it takes a humbling experience to realize, okay, hey,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know as much, hey, I may not know as much as I thought I did.
And sometimes that has to happen, and
Yeah.
sometimes the Lord will do that. And he's done that with me. Obviously he's done this for others as well, but sometimes he has to put you in a humbling state because he knows that's the only state that you're going to listen in.
Yeah.
So remember in Luke 15, the only time that the young man's reasoning returned back to him is when he was at his lowest point, right? He's eating slop, right, with the pigs, right? Even in the book of Daniel with Nebuchadnezzar, look at this great Babylon. Look at everything I've built. Next thing you know, he's growing feathers, right? And he's eating grass. And so now he realizes, now I'm going to praise and extol the Most High. Sometimes he has to put us in a humble state in order for us to really listen. And in both instances, it said their reason returned back, right? Sometimes, okay, Lord, I get it now. Like it makes sense. Now I'm ready to listen, which is we don't want you to get to that point, but sometimes that's the point you have to get to in order for you to really get the message, if that makes sense. So we talk about, who is this that darkens counsel? Well, we darken counsel by not knowing our worth. We darken counsel by doing absolutely nothing and being afraid. We darken counsel by listening to the wrong advice. But then here's number 4, and we just brought up this point literally like right before we press record.
Yeah.
Literally right before. He said,
Yeah.
"Oh, wait, we got to put that in there." So we darken counsel by number 4, not seeking first the kingdom. And so think about all the things that we seek first. And so when things don't work out, then we blame God. But sometimes if God could answer us, he will say, well, what have you been seeking? I mean, it's literally so simple, man. And what do you think about when you kind of think about this topic of just not seeking first the kingdom in Matthew 6?
It's like we were talking about earlier. The first thing that comes to mind was, the focus has to be on the kingdom. It has to be on serving God. It has to be, that Ecclesiastes 12:13 mindset. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty. Well, really, it's the whole of man. It's the whole purpose of our being. When we lose that focus, again, Matthew 14:30, Peter sees Jesus walking on water, and he starts walking out to Jesus. Well, he takes his eyes off Jesus and starts looking at the waves, at the wind, at everything else that's going on around him. And when he takes his eyes off Christ, what happens to him? He begins to sink. We can be the same way when we take our eyes off of focusing on seeking the kingdom. When we forget our purpose, and while we're here, we can start drifting. We can start going in that wrong direction. We can start sinking, if you will. And so the result of taking your focus off of seeking first the kingdom is always going to be bad. It's never going to be good.
And I think about this, and we talked about this a little bit the last couple of days. John chapter 5, right? John
Oh
chapter
yeah,
5,
yeah,
right? With the
yeah. That's right.
the man
With the
at
yeah,
Bethesda. So now in verse 6, here's the great thing about Christ, man. So in John chapter 5, verse number 6, we obviously know that there was a man there. He had an infirmity for 38 years. And his whole life, he's been reaching for this quote unquote magical pool right? Which is just, it happened to come up just because of natural causes. But this pool that he believed, if I just got to touch that, right, I can be whole. And he's been trying for 38 years. So this shows that sometimes most of our lives, even as Christians, most of our lives, we're reaching for stuff that we think is going to heal us. And we find out after all these years, man, I should have been doing this when I was your age, Sam. I should have been doing this when I was your age, Jordan. But no, I thought this was the thing that was going to give me what I wanted, right? So then in verse 6, Jesus saw him and he knew that he'd been there a long time. And so here's the great thing about Christ. He said, will you or wilt thou be made whole? So think about the question that Jesus is asking all of us today, bro. Is, okay, you've been darkening counsel by not knowing your worth. You've been darkening counsel by absolutely doing nothing. And put your age there. This was 38 years for him. You've been darkening counsel by listening to the wrong people. You've been darkening counsel by not seeking first my kingdom. So Jesus will ask us the same question that he asked this man. Do you want to be made whole? Obviously, most of us would probably say yes. But there's always an action right after that. And so in verse 8, Jesus said to him, rise, take up your bed, and walk. So imagine, as Christian people, we've been doing the wrong thing for so long. Jesus in verse 8, for 38 years, this man has been dragging his legs to this pool. But one day, Jesus tells him to do something that he hasn't been able to do. And so sometimes, in order to seek first the kingdom, you're going to have to switch some things that you have been doing. And that's what gets people stuck. Well, I just don't know if I really have time. I can't really let go of that right now. So I can't give up the kingdom. I can't do what the kingdom wants me to do right now. You got your answer. Right? You really don't want to be made whole. In verbiage, yes, you do. But in action, you don't. So I think this is very important when we talk about seeking first the kingdom, the importance of actually following through rather than just, well, this is what I want to do. The follow through means so much, man. So when you think about this, when you think about Matthew 6:33, actually, especially in chapter number 7, notice the continual action here. Starting in verse number 7. Ask and it shall be given unto you, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be open unto you. But then verse 8, every man, again in the King James, ETH is added after each one. So everyone that asketh, receiveth, right? Everyone that seeketh, findeth. And to him that knocketh, the door shall be opened, plural. So the ETH always means a continual action. So when we're seeking first the kingdom, do we just do it for like 2 months? Or do we do it just when you have time available, or when things slow down for you, or when your life is kind of lining up for you? No matter where you're at in life, we have to continue to seek, knock, and ask, and we have to continue to follow through. I mean, it's just like basketball, right? The follow through, right? The follow through has got to be there.
Yeah.
Right. So you have anything else as we keep going through this?
No, I mean, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's so easy sometimes to lose that focus, to get busy, or to get bogged down in things and think, okay, what do I need to do here? What do I need to do there? What do I need to do here? What do I need to do here? When really it's as simple as just Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom, seek first the kingdom, seek first the kingdom. The focus always has to be there. And but it's easy to be like Peter, start looking at everything else, start focusing everywhere else.
It's so simple, man.
It is.
It's so simple. And notice how easy, as we, kind of put all this together, and I've been guilty of this too, but notice how easy it is to just darken counsel. Well, I'm not good enough, number one. Well, I don't think I can do it, so I'm afraid. Well, I've been listening to the wrong people. I'm not seeking first the kingdom. It's so easy to get your thoughts clouded that you think you're doing right, but you're really not doing right. And so this is the importance, as we talked about before. And I loved that verse that you brought up in Colossians chapter 1. We got to keep studying. We got so that we can walk worthy. but it's very important as we continue to do these things that we don't darken counsel. And so I think it's very important as we continue to study this. But I want you to notice something quickly as we look at this. Notice Philippians chapter 1. Philippians chapter 1. And I think this is a prayer that we can pray for ourselves but other people. But notice Philippians chapter 1 beginning in verse 8. For God is my record, how greatly I long after you in the bowels of Jesus Christ. And this I pray, that your love may abound more and more. How? In knowledge and in all judgment. So verse 10, so that you don't have to walk around feeling unworthy. You don't have to walk around being afraid or listening to the wrong people or not seeking first the kingdom, so that you can approve those things that are excellent and that you might be sincere without offense unto the day of Christ. So, I mean, that's the goal. And we can do, it's possible for us, man. And we just got to put in the work and we can get this done. You guys, you have any closing thoughts before we get out of here?
Man, I think you did it pretty good right there. You did it pretty good. No, the only thing I can think of is, no matter what may be going on, whatever you may be experiencing, whoever's on the other end of this podcast, and me and you included,
Yeah.
Just there, the best place to go for wise counsel is always going to be right here in this book. The best place to go, and it's going to be getting on your knees and praying. Just let it all out. Like is like when me and you were talking on the phone, for an hour and a half or so.
Yeah.
Talk to God. Let it all out. 1 Peter 5:7. He cares for us. He wants to hear from you. And so, just keep going.
That's
Just
good,
keep
man.
going. Just keep
That's
going.
good. And that's something that we all can get better at, talking about who is this that darkens counsel. We've all been guilty of darkening counsel and thinking that we're smarter than what we really are. But as Sam mentioned before, it takes some humility to sit back for a little bit and say, okay, let me look at this better. Let me improve myself. Let me make sure, my attitude's right about certain things. And let me just keep being the best person I can. So hopefully this podcast was able to help you today. Again, we're just so thankful that you guys are here. If you do want to support again, just go and visit anchor.fm/when the scriptures become real/support, and you'll be able to support there. And we're so thankful for those who have supported the podcast. Sam, we appreciate you, man. Thanks for being on.
Oh man, absolutely. Thankful to be here. I'm thankful for what you do, man. I really enjoy the podcast.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
This probably won't be his last time being on here either. So he'll probably be on again. Look at that excitement. That's what I'm talking about. So,
this is so much fun. This is fun. This is really fun. So just getting to open the Bible and just study and just, we help one another, it helps us grow. And, I know, this, man, it's just helpful. It's so fun, so enjoyable. And what better way to help one another as brothers and sisters in Christ to get to where we're all trying to go, and that's heaven, than having discussions straight from the scriptures.
That's it, man. And we're just so thankful for this opportunity that we have. Hopefully you guys enjoy the podcast. Again, we'll be back on Monday with another podcast. So we're thankful that you guys are here, and we will see you guys, Lord willing, next week. Thanks, guys.